Welcome back, Exiles. I started using Flicker Strike as a complete meme and now I can't stop flicking. So this is your beginner's guide to Flicker Strike. Every chapter is designed to give you the basic mechanics so you can go, oh, that's how they do it, and you can go off and make your own builds. There is something incredibly satisfying about this game of starting to make your own builds, it completely sucking, and then all of a sudden it clicks and you start demolishing things. So that's what we're doing today. How you flicker strike multiple times. If you've seen like little YouTube shorts and people are flying all over the place, like how they do that, how you generate more power charges, some general advice about the stats you should be putting into your gear, and also your passive skill tree. And at the end, I'm going to show you my ice flicker strike build. Incredibly satisfying, being able to flick between mobs of enemies and watch them shatter. It's not the best. I'm still playing the game via the rule of cool and I'm enjoying it. I know it's not the best Flicker Strike build, but I'll showcase it to you and show you how you apply all this knowledge, and hopefully you can do something even better. Let's go. Alright, let's start with the most commonly asked question, which is how do you sustain Flicker Strike? If you're just kind of getting to this level on your monk and you see someone use Flicker Strike and you see them teleporting all over the place, you're like, how are they doing so many Flicker Strikes? And you're likely asking that question because for Flicker Strike, it says you cannot gain power charges while using this skill. And so the way the skill functions is you get power charges, and then the skill consumes that power charge, teleports and strikes 2 additional times per power charge. So you only have, so many power charges, means you can only teleport so many times. So how are people doing more than that? Let's answer that question. Part of that answer is increasing the quality of your Flicker Strike. So this is my Flicker Strike. Its quality has been increased by plus 20%. When you hold Alt over skill, you get some additional information. Specifically, this bit at the bottom says additional effects from quality. It says 20% chance to not remove charges on use. So you have to increase its quality, and for the way you do that is by using what's called Gem Cutters Prisms. You just right click on this and you hover over it and you'll increase its quality. Actually, I do need to do something. I'm going to just do this over Ice Strike so you guys can see what actually happens here. So as you can see, Ice Strike has got no quality on it. This is additional effects from quality, 0 more attack speed. I was like, great. I actually want some more attack speed on my Ice Strike. I grab a prism, I right click and then I left click on here. Right, and now I have 2% more attack speed with a maximum of 10%. Cool. So that's what you need to do for your Flicker Strike. And I believe you get 5% for every gem cutter. So you need 4. The very first thing you need to do is get 4 gem cutters. Right click over there, left click on it, get 20%. Now, what do you do if you don't have any gem cutters? There is something you can do if you are new to the game. This is a beginner's guide, so we'll go over it. And that is going over to the currency exchange from Alva. You have to click on this and you click I want. And you say, I want gem cutters prisms. There we go. And you say, I have most likely exalted orbs. And let's just say you want, we'll just do 1 so you can see how much it costs. So it's going to cost you, right now, it's a ratio of 1 to 3. So for 1 prism, it's going to cost you 3 exalted orbs, and you can buy them that way if you don't have them. This is kind of one of the very first basic mechanics you need if you want to run a Flicker Strike build. So you need to improve the quality of your Flicker Strike. The next thing that sustains Flicker Strike is a support gem called Perpetual Charge. Now this says supported skills have 35% chance to not remove charges, but still count as consuming them. So this gives a 35% chance of not removing a charge, and your quality gives a 20% chance to not remove a charge. When you combine these together, the maths, if you open up your stat sheet, you'll see chance to not remove charges is a 55% chance. So over 50% chance that you're not going to actually consume a charge when you start flickering and teleporting. So when you see these crazy clips of people just like going on forever with Flicker Strikes, there is a huge portion of luck in that, and they're just getting lucky and not removing charges. So the Flicker Strike keeps continuing until the charges are expended or until all the enemies are expended. So that's one half of the equation. The second half of the equation is, well, how do you get more power charges? More power charges equals more Flicker Strikes. And of course, they might not be consumed, so you're going to go even further. So what do you do to get more power charges? The first thing is you open your passive skill tree and you type in up the top here, power charge as 2 separate words, and you start zooming in and looking for things that are flashing. So if you have a look over here, we'll see that this, the power within, has +1 maximum power charges. So if you get this node, you actually go from the base of 3 to having 4 power charges. There's another one over here, +2 maximum charges. So regardless of what your passive tree looks like, if you want to start doing a Flicker Strike build, punch in power charge and look for where it says plus a number to your maximum power charges. As you can see, I've got some that I can still grab. There's one here as well, plus the maximum power charges. Cool. So start working on those to increase how many power charges you have. There are also check anything else that is flashing that could impact your consumption of power charges. Like for example, for the monk, over here with the one with the storm says quarterstaff skills that consume power charges count as consuming an additional power charge. I haven't actually tested this, but I assume this functions as it says, which might be risky in PoE. But the Flicker Strike is a quarterstaff skill and it does consume a power charge. So technically consuming 1 when you have this should actually count as 2, meaning more teleports and attacks. Great. There is another mechanic too that you can use to increase your power charges, and that might be just to find gear. Like, so for example, this unique actually has +1 to maximum power charges. Cool. So that's how you, when you see other players running around the Flicker Striking, they've got their Flicker Strike quality increased, they've got perpetual charge, there's just a chance they're not going to consume a power charge, and then they've just got as many power charges as they can before they Flicker Strike. Okay, now that you know how to sustain the flicker, how do you actually generate charges? Like what are you doing to generate your powered charges? And there's plenty of different ways you can do this. I think there's 2 main pathways to decide. And the first pathway is if you use the Keystone Resonance. If you're new to the game, these nodes are called Keystones. If you want to see Keystones, you just type in Keystone and they'll start flashing. These are basically build altering nodes. You got to like basically make your build around these kind of nodes. So this one's called Resonance, and it says that you get power charges when you make frenzy charges, right? Gain power charges instead of frenzy charges. So it makes your whole build about technically frenzy charges, and when you make a frenzy charge, it actually becomes a power charge. And then there's another way which I'll talk about in a second. So let's talk about if you use the Resonance Keystone. How does this work? So what you need to pair it with is a buff called Combat Frenzy. And this says gain a frenzy charge when you freeze, electrocute, or pin an enemy no more than once every 2.4 seconds. So this is pretty easy to do as a monk, especially the freeze. The only thing you need to do to get freeze is apply cold damage. And the way that I've been doing that is with Ice Strike. You pretty much hit an enemy and they're going to freeze with this. And then that's going to generate a frenzy charge, and your Resonance Keystone is going to convert that to a combat charge. So you go around punching everything with Ice Strike, get lots of freezes, your charges have been generated. To get Electrocute is a little bit different because lightning damage only gives the shock ailments. You've got to do something different to get the electrocute ailments. So if you have something like Tempest Flurry or any lightning skill, you do have to apply a gem support called Electrocute. Go figure. And this says supported skills cannot inflict shock. Lightning damage from supported skills contributes to electrocution buildup. So then if you prefer like a lightning build, you can go down this route, but you have to apply electrocute to your lightning skill, and then all of a sudden you can generate frenzy charges, and your Keystone's going to convert that to combat charges. The other great thing is as a monk, you can place a Tempest Bell down and you actually apply ailments to that bell. You can freeze the bell, you can electrocute the bell, you can shock the bell, but the shock's not going to give you a charge. But when you apply ailments to the bell, that will also generate charges for you. Now, I'm very positive this was easier before the last patch because I think the way that freeze has changed. From memory, I was like generating a lot of charges by continually hitting the bell with like Ice Strike. But now you just kind of get one charge off that. Makes it a little bit tougher when it gets to bosses, but we'll talk about that later. Regardless, you need to freeze, electrocute, have combat frenzy on, and that's going to generate your charges. So what's the other way? What if you don't want to use the Resonance Keystone? What's the other most effective way to generate charges? Okay, so if you're not using the Resonance Keystone to generate your power charges, what's the other alternative? What have I seen? What do I recommend? I think as a monk, you probably have all the basic ways of generating power charges, which you would have been doing from like level 1 onwards. There is a decent buff called Lingering Illusion, and you essentially just dodge and makes an illusion, and if someone hits it, you actually get a power charge. This is very good for generating power charges on bosses, but some of the best tech that I have seen for generating power charges comes from a YouTuber called Goblin Inc. I think this is probably the best endgame Flicker Strike build. You might have already seen it. It's got 160,000 views at the time of recording this. I'll leave a link down below. I'm not quite at this stage yet, but I'm probably going to transition to using this later. And the reason why it's so good is he pretty much finds a loophole for generating power charges during Flicker Strike. Remember, you're not meant to, well, you're not allowed to gain, what is this? You cannot gain power charges while using the skill. But it doesn't say you can't generate power charges using the skill. And what Goblin does is essentially generates power charges during Flicker Strike and then picks them up once Flicker Strike is done. And the combo that he uses is Reaper's Invocation with Profane Ritual, with Profusion, and with Impetus. I'm going to leave a video down below so you can actually see his footage and you can go watch it if you think you're at that stage and you can start heading towards that. I'm still on my ice build, and I can't use this with my ice build because I need corpses, and I don't want to give up on my ice build quite yet. So I'll leave that down below and you can have a look. I think it's probably the best power charge generation tech out there right now, but quite close towards the end game. Okay, before I send you out into the real world to spread the good word of the Flicker Strike and to make your own Flicker Strike builds, let's quickly talk about stats, because I had a lot of trouble with Flicker Strike to the point like, this is just a meme, it's not very good. And then I changed a bunch of stuff, and obviously now I'm like full send Flicker Strike. The Flicker Strike is going to put you in very dangerous situations like all the time. You are like, hands off the wheel, I have no control of where my character goes. Who knows? You'll come out of a flicker and you could just be absolutely ganked by a whole bunch of monsters. So having your defenses high is going to help a lot. I originally went like full evasion because there are some things in the monk skill tree that, especially the ascendancy skill tree, that favors evasion. What I'm talking about, I might as well just show you because we're doing a beginner's guide. Protect me from harm, which does your physical damage reduction from armor is based on your armor and evasion rating, 40% less evasion. So I was like, oh, I wonder how high I can get that just fully sending into evasion. There's also another node here that benefits off evasion, but it also benefits off energy shield too to give you more spirit. Now, as soon as I went away, the evasion's cool, but you're like survive, 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 and then something eventually gets through and then you're just instantly dead. I found much, much more success getting all pieces of armor with a split of dex and intellect, which means you get a split of evasion and energy shield, and just went for evasion and energy shield on pretty much all of my gear. Plus trying to get all my resistances. Remember, don't forget about your resistances. My fire, lightning, cold, my chaos is pretty low, but bumping those up, split evasion and energy shield, and this kind of solidified for me Flicker Strike and just being able to survive a lot more and still have a lot of fun with it. I think if you don't get this stuff up, it can be a pretty rough time going at the start. Other thing is, if you just start the game and you just like, how do I even get this stuff? I highly advise to trade. Some people gave me a bit of grief for trading items on stream. I was like, what do you mean? Why are you upset? I don't know. I don't know anything about this community, but I can say personally, buying items really helped me to understand the stats, the tier system, what gear rolls with what tiers, and what I should be looking for. And I have a lot more knowledge about that now. So when I want to do like a solo self-found and not do any trading, I actually know what I'm looking for on gear. So I do highly recommend to start trading and buying items from other players to fill any holes you have in your defenses. If you don't know how to trade, I have a YouTube short, like 60 seconds of how to do it. I will link that down below as well. And all the gear that you see on my character costs like 1 exalt. It's like the lowest price you could probably pay usually for gear on the trading website. So it's very, very cheap. I've got no uniques in there. And my ice build, I took through a tier 13 waystone. So I think that's okay. Okay, if you're still here, last bit of advice for those who want to make their own Flicker Strike builds. This is my advice for the passive skill tree. Take whatever path you want, but these are the things that I prioritize. Firstly, critical hit chance and critical damage. So you'll just type up critical hits, and then you can see what is flashing, and you start work your way towards getting some critical hit chance. Be aware that depending how, well, I guess you got to have Flicker Strike available, so you should have a fair few points to spend, but critical hit chance and critical damage takes a little bit of time to ramp up, so you won't really feel the effects until you actually get a nice big chunk of critical hit chance and then critical damage, and then you'll be off to the races. So that's the first things first. Next thing is, please don't ignore your evasion and energy shield nodes. Once again, Flicker Strike is going to put you in a lot of danger, so make sure you have some defense in there. There's some great nodes over here you can work your way towards. As you can see, I'm still leveling up, so I'm going to unlock these a little bit later. Also, you likely are aware there's the quarterstaff cluster over here. These are all very good nodes, so most builds will actually start making their way over to the quarterstaff cluster. And then finally, sort of general advice, once again, comes down to defense, man. I was like a glass cannon before and just failing everything because I just get hit once and fall over. And really the big game changer for me, even though I wanted to access some of this critical hit chance and some critical hits that ignore enemy monsters' elemental resistances, which seems incredibly good for a Flicker crit build, I really didn't improve until I got these 4 clusters here. This gives you a huge amount of physical damage reduction based on your evasion rating. This one here is what helps generate spirit. A lot of the endgame builds you'll see, you have to have a good chest piece on, your body armor with really, really high spirit, really high energy or evasion rating on it, and that actually generates spirit for you. And you'll find a lot of Flicker builds have a lot of buffs running at the same time. That's because they have a god chest piece, which I'm not there yet. Like I said, all my stuff I bought on the trade is like 1 exalt, so it's not very high for me. That is all my general advice for my new Flicker friends. Go forth, make your own builds, have fun, rule of cool and all that. I hope you enjoy. Now let me talk you through my ice build specifically, how I'm actually freezing enemies and shattering them with a Flicker build. Okay, let me run you through my sort of ice Flicker Strike build. First thing is, you probably would have noticed, is like, how am I applying cold damage? Because Flicker Strike itself doesn't apply any elements to it. So you have to get cold damage on it somehow to actually freeze enemies. And you do enough cold damage, you'll freeze an enemy. So what I've done is on the quarterstaff, I've actually prioritized getting flat cold damage on my quarterstaff. I've even put some 2 runes in here that have given additional cold damage for it as well. So that's giving us some flat cold damage. It's not the only way you can get cold damage though. You can also pick up some cold damage in your passive skill tree. I actually picked up some here from the Ascendancy point. I am Blizzard. This gains 10% of damage as extra cold damage. So take your total damage, 10% of that gets added on top as extra cold damage. So just adding cold damage to your build. You can just type up here extra colds and just see what starts flashing. So we've got 1 node here. We can also see it. I forgot there's a node here. I thought, oh, that might help as well. Because for this build, I am prioritizing getting as much cold damage as possible, making that value as high as possible. So when I do hit an enemy, they freeze, essentially. So, yeah, this has gained 5% of damage as extra cold damage. That will help out as well. Now, previously, I did also build into a lot of elemental damage here, but I've had to take this off just for the moment. Increasing your elemental damage would also help bump up your cold status as well. So hopefully when you get that first flick off, you start freezing enemies straight away. So that's how I'm getting the cold damage. And then if you have a look on my Flicker Strike, you'll notice that cold damage is my highest value, 900 to about 1300 cold damage being applied when I flick. Okay, so what support gems do I have on Flicker Strike? I have Perpetual Charge. Like I said before, this gives us 35% chance to not remove charges, but still count as consuming them. And like I said at the beginning, I have 20% chance to not remove charges. Use your gem cutters to increase your quality of your skill. That'll give you 20% there, giving you a total of 55% chance to not consume a charge on your Flicker Strike. Then I have Cold Infusion, which gives gains 25% of your damage as extra cold damage, so getting some more cold damage stacked on top. Attacks gain 35, so the next one is Ice Bite. Attacks gain 35% of damage as cold damage for 3 seconds on freezing an enemy. So hopefully I get a freeze, and then I get another 35% of cold damage on top of that. And then Concentrated Effect. Now, Flicker Strike actually counts as an AoE, so you can put AoE support gems onto it. And this says supporter skills deal 40% more area damage, but it has less area of effect. I don't even know what that impacts for Flicker Strike. Maybe it's distance as you teleport, but regardless, we get a flat 40% more damage. Remember, damage stacking principles. If you see the word more, you should sit up in your chair, because that is a multiplicative multiplier rather than additive. So that's something you want to prioritize. Now, this is not the highest damage you can get with Flicker Strike. I am well aware of that. I'm just trying to have fun. It is very satisfying to freeze enemies as you fly around the room. Cool. After that, we probably should talk about Ice Strike, or actually how we generate charges. So I have gone down the path of the Resonance skill tree, which is generating frenzy charges to get a power charge. And that means I've got to have the buff Combat Frenzy on. When you put Combat Frenzy, you'll get a frenzy charge when you freeze, electrocute, or pin an enemy. And so the way that I'm doing that is I'm using Ice Strike. This is very, very easy to freeze enemies with Ice Strike. You just spam this. This is my main move. You just spam this and things will start freezing. You're going to get a frenzy charge, which is going to be converted to a combat charge by resonance, allowing you to get ready to flicker. The support nodes I have on Ice Strike are the Inspiration. Supporter skills have 40% less cost. I pretty much use this as my left click. I don't ever left click. I just use Ice Strike the entire time. So it can be pretty mana heavy. So I put 40% less cost on it. I'm losing damage, but the thing is you have really good crowd control and everything freezes quite often. So it takes a little bit more shots to kill stuff, but it's not a huge issue because they're already frozen. And once I obviously get more gems to open these up, it won't be an issue too, because I can stack some more damage onto it. Then Martial Tempo. Ice Strike is quite slow, especially if you're used to lightning skills. That's where I originally started, was more lightning stuff. And then I was like, oh man, this sucks. It's so slow. So I put Martial Tempo, which increases its attack speed by 25%. And then Close Combat. I'm always close to this one. The really cool thing about Ice Strike is you actually teleport too. You actually like sort of blink towards them when you start the move. So you're always going to be really, really close. And this is just going to give me 25% more attack damage if they're within 1 meter, which they're going to be. So once I've used Ice Strike to generate my power charges, there's one thing that I have been doing before I flicker, and I just found this makes it a lot more consistent. I don't know exactly why, and if you're a PoE vet, then maybe you can let me know. But I do charge my staff up before I flicker. So I actually generate charges. I then have to consume those charges to actually use charge staff. And this empowers your quarterstaff with lightning damage, not cold damage, just lightning damage. And I've got a couple of support gems on here. Persistence. So this gives 40% more skill effect duration. So charge staff lasts for longer. Conduction, 100% more chance to shock. And then Overcharge, 75% increased magnitude of shocks inflicted. Supporter skills have 50% less shock duration. So shock is going to give us more damage. Now you could technically put your electrocute on here, which will then go quite nicely with Combat Frenzy. So you charge your staff and then hopefully you get some electrocutes off and that will generate more power charges for you. I find often, because I use charge staff with Ice Strike, so I often end up freezing them before they get electrocuted anyway, so it wasn't quite working for me. But ideally what I do is I use charge staff and then I just generate more charges with charge staff on, and then I send it with flicker. And I find when I do that, nearly all the time enemies will freeze. then what happens is I get a freeze off, and then I have another buff called Herald of Ice. And essentially when you destroy a frozen enemy, they shatter. And when they shatter with this buff activated, they essentially explode. Enemies you shatter explode. It does a huge amount of cold damage to everything around it again. Fantastic, because then you might freeze more enemies and they might explode as well. So on Herald of Ice as a buff, I have the support gems Cold Penetration, so just lowering the resistances of any enemies around that get hit by that cold damage. Hopefully allowing me to freeze them as well if they haven't died. Hopefully they get lower resistance, and then I'm going to slap them with a cold Flicker Strike. Cannibalism, so we're just getting a little bit of sustain here and getting 4% of life recovered on kill with supported skill. So cool, just getting 4% back when I get a kill, hopefully with Flicker Strike. And also some mana regeneration too, 30% increased mana regeneration from Clarity while this skill is active. You can also Flicker Strike onto your Tempest Bell for really good damage against bosses. As long as you've got all your power charges built, you can actually dump the bell onto a boss and flicker, and you just go backwards and forwards, hitting the bell, hitting the boss, and doing incredible damage. You build the combo for the bell by using Ice Strike. So you just hold down that combo, that will build your Tempest Bell. I'm very certain it builds with Flicker Strike itself, because this is, yeah, it should, because this is a Flicker Strike is a strike, and you need strikes to generate the combos. And so what's nice sometimes is you can come out of a Flicker Strike, you have Tempest Bell ready, you can slam the Tempest Bell down if anything's still alive, and then you can start hitting that as well. So the support gems I have on Tempest Bell is Magnified Effects. Supported skills have 40% more area of effects. Primal Armament, 25% more weapon elemental damage, just to help freeze anything around me, or electrocute, or shock. Shock specifically for boss damage to help increase the DPS. And then Hourglass, this gives you 40% more damage, so a nice big bonus there, but it does have a 10-second cooldown. However, you can kind of spam Tempest Bell, but I find with the Flicker build, I'm happy with the 10-second cooldown. It can be on cooldown, I Flicker Strike, I drop the bell, I go back to building charges and all that kind of stuff, and by the time I need it again, it's back up. And then finally, because Flicker Strike, like I've always been saying, is going to put you in danger, you need some defensive buffs on too. I would prioritize Wind Dancer first. It's crazy good for improving your evasion as a monk, really good stat to build into. Also, what it does is it will knock back enemies. If you do get pinned by a group of enemies, it will actually do just like a little mini explosion, gale force winds, and push enemies back, giving you a little bit of breathing room so you can escape and get your bearings. So I have lockdown on that, which is 120% more pin build up against enemies. Pin, so hopefully supported skills can't stun, but they will do pin damage, or physical damage from supported skill is pinning. And then also Wind Wave to trigger another Wind Wave if you get stunned. The last defensive buff I have on is Ghost Dance, and this works with your energy shield. Another really good reason not to just have evasion, but to have your energy shield as well. And this helps recover your energy shield really quick if you start getting mobbed. And I just have fast forward support skill on that, which is going to allow this to proc more often. And that is my Ice Flicker build. Let me know what you're having fun with and what you're running with your Flicker builds. Go forth and spread the good word of Flicker Strike. I'm having a ton of fun with it. It's going to be a while before I take it off, I think. Looking to transition into that more of an end game, a powered charge generation tech that I showed you with Goblin Inc. Go check out that channel too. And if you can't think of a comment like to support the channel, just leave the word Flicker Strike, or the words Flicker Strike. As usual, it's been a pleasure. This is Myelin Games. Peace.